I've quoted someone who said that he was giving me details of an accident. He said someone cut him off, slammed on their brakes, that old number, he rear-ended him. They got a payout from his insurance company. And apparently it was that person's profession. And apparently they did, according to the story that he gave, they did the same thing to a judge. And that's how they got caught, because they had just kept doing that. And so, if the underwriters see that you've been rear-ended twice, they're not going to automatically think like, well, this is, how you make money.
Landline now. Welcome back. Like tires, fuel, and an engine, insurance is one of those things you just have to have for your truck. But not all insurance is created equal. I'm here now with OOIDA's Trina Skywalker and Lisa Waske to answer some questions. Ladies, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Our topic today is rates and the trends that truckers are perceiving in regard to those rates. Lisa, let's start with this. What are we actually hearing from truckers on this topic?
We get calls all the time about rates and why. Always they want to know why they're going up. Multiple reasons. It could be some that are specific to their policy. It could just be industry-wide, factors. Number one reason, claims. If you have a claim, you're most of the time going to see an increase.
Well, to be fair, I like to know when my rates are going up too.
Yeah.
Or why, not when.
Yeah.
Well, both.
Both,
yeah.
For sure.
Well, you mentioned claims. I mean, is it strictly on an individual basis, or does that affect things more broadly? I mean, if there are a lot of claims industry-wide, does that have an effect?
It does, yeah. I mean, because if you live in a place that's prone to flooding, hurricane, something like that, you could see a rate increase, not because you've had a claim, but because your county, your state just sees a lot of catastrophe, a lot of losses, and so they'll raise rates in general.
Well, and something we've discussed in the past, obviously we specialize in commercial insurance, but insurance, is all around us, and something that has come up in discussions too. If you go through like someone for personal auto, most of those places have homeowners, personal auto. Some of them dabble in commercial auto, but if you're in a hurricane-prone area or, tornado alley, things like that,
yeah.
Some of those insurance companies are paying out on multiple levels. They're paying out on homeowners claims. They're paying out on personal auto claims. So like Lisa said, even if you're not directly affected by it, you're insured with a company that's paying out left and right in these situations. And it's going to have a broad impact.
I'm curious because, of course, with truckers, they might be in a situation where they're rarely actually in their home state because they're traveling across the entire country. Does it still affect them if their home state is having this kind of problem, even if they're not there very often?
Yes, because they're still looking at it as in general. We've paid out a lot in Missouri, so you're affected.
Yeah, it's a high-risk area.
Yep.
There's a couple of states, southern states, that are highly impacted by this kind of stuff. Yeah. And we can easily say that they're higher rated states all the way around.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about how do you address that as a trucker? I mean, if you're in this situation and your home base has led to a situation where you're looking at a higher rate, what can you do? I mean, do you have options, or are you just facing that?
You always have options. You can always shop around, obviously. You're still going to be in your home state because they're going to base it out of where you're from or where you live and tag your vehicle.
You could move.
Yeah, you could move.
Well,
That's an expensive way to get around the rates, but
Yep.
Well, I would suspect there might be some people in Asheville that are considering that after
well,
what's happened
I'm sure.
there.
Yeah, that's an awful situation.
Well, like New Jersey. New Jersey just raised their limits from $1,750,000 to $1 million to $1.5 million.
Yeah.
And they don't have a choice. They have to either carry the 1.5 or move.
True.
Now, that's interesting because we have talked about efforts to do that on the national level. So we're having a little unfortunate experiment there in New Jersey.
Right.
That's a really nice way to put it.
I'm trying to be good. I'm trying to be good. Because, yeah, it's obviously a situation that we don't think is justified.
Right.
Basically. But what is that increase in the amount covered doing to rates to truckers based in New Jersey?
I mean, even if they're a perfectly clean record, lots of experience, no accidents, anything like that, they're still being affected because their rates are going up.
Right.
You know, I mean, I don't know an exact dollar amount, but you're going from $1 million to 1.5.
Right. Well, and it's still new.
Yeah.
I mean, so actually this is a good segue, not that we've gotten out of the topic, but I mean, this is another reason that insurance rates continue to increase. And we're not talking about, obviously it costs more to insure someone for $1.5 million than it does for $1,750,000. That's obvious, it's going to cost more. But there's also potential for higher claim payouts, and this has just started. We have no idea how it's going to impact lawsuits, how it's going to impact claims. There's a lot of frivolous lawsuits.
Right.
And it's something that we've talked about amongst ourselves and discussed amongst ourselves because this truly is going to be eye-opening to see how much more exposure there is, how much more are we paying out on claims just because we insure at a higher limit. And we all know that 90% of claims are sufficiently covered by the $750,000 limit. So,
well, what is the average? Like $18,000, I think.
I'm not sure what the average is, but I mean, we've read studies saying,
it's quite low.
Yeah. The 750 is plenty sufficient, and most people carry $1 million. So, it's going to lead to further insurance increases. I can almost guarantee it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a factor that I think a lot of people find particularly galling, for lack of a better term. And that is, we always talk about truckers who are safe because they have never been the cause of an accident. But you can never be the cause of an accident and have several accidents where you're not at fault. How can that affect rates? I mean, when can it at all?
Oh, definitely. I mean, even if you're, like you said, you're never at fault. But if you have 1, 2, 3, not at fault, even if they're small, minor claims, an insurance company is going to look at you. It's going to make you stand out, and they're going to say, are you the problem? Are you just not paying attention? And it could cause an increase.
Yeah. There's they do look at it like lack of preventative action, proactive driving. Also, though, I've quoted someone who said that he was giving me details of an accident. He said someone cut him off, slammed on their brakes, that old number, he rear-ended him. They got a payout from his insurance company. And apparently it was that person's profession. And apparently they did, according to the story that he gave, they did the same thing to a judge. And that's how they got caught because they had just kept doing that. And so, if the underwriters see that you've been rear-ended twice, they're not going to automatically think well, this is, how you make money. But there is something to that. There is a lack of, like I said, proactive driving. There's a factor that's causing that.
Causing it, yeah.
Usually.
Yeah. And, of course, you've got the case. I mean, you talked about the case where someone jumps in front of you but there's also the case where someone rear ends you.
Sure.
Yeah.
But if you get enough of those, that can indicate a higher risk that the insurance company is going to react to, right?
Yes.
Okay.
They don't look at it, if you have one not at fault or non-preventable, they don't look at it the same as a preventable. But once you have 4 not at fault or unpreventables, it's definitely going to look different.
Yeah. They're going to notice you
more
than somebody who doesn't.
There was a term that you used in some of the notes that you sent me earlier that I found very interesting. Loss-free discounts seems obvious, but there's always more to it. Can you explain what we mean by that term and kind of how that affects this type of situation we're talking about?
Well, most insurance companies are going to offer some sort of a credit or discount for safe driving.
Claims free.
Right. And so, but we have seen the situations where, sometimes even if you have a non-preventable, like a deer strike, some companies may still offer those and some may not. Because I haven't found one of those deer that are insured, so chances are it's going to be your insurance company.
They're not paying out of pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it can have a big impact. And when we're explaining rate increases to customers that call about it, sometimes, and it's hard to wrap your head around, but sometimes it's just the conversation of the underwriters didn't increase your rate for that deer strike. They didn't charge you more. They didn't say, oh, now you seem to be an unsafe driver. But you still lose the discounts. And so, no matter how you explain it, it's still a rate increase. So, having those and then losing them in and of itself is part of the reason we see increases year to year. Yeah.
Another factor that you had mentioned, and certainly one that I've thought about, is the cost of equipment. And we've talked on the show about how different regulatory changes, especially EPA requirements, have led to increase after increase after increase in the cost of buying a new truck. And obviously, if you're fixing or replacing, you're in a situation where that's going to definitely affect what the insurance company is paying out. I'm wondering if you can walk us through what the cost of equipment has done in terms of insurance rates or is likely to do.
Well, you'd like to think that it's the brand new vehicles that are causing the more payouts, but sometimes it's the older because people are trying to sidestep those EPA regulations. So they're finding older trucks and fixing them up so that they don't have to follow or have some of those things on their truck, to meet those guidelines.
And parts are harder to find.
Yeah, and with parts being harder, but it also it makes the value of trucks higher because people are looking for those and they're buying them. And so, people are like, oh, I got to have that. So you're trying to replace the parts. You're trying to find those trucks.
Not all the exact same reasons, but in my mind, it's comparable to classic cars. They become more rare. I mean, yeah, it's harder to find parts, but it's harder to find that equipment in general. And depending on what type of equipment, it's gonna drive up the price.
It's interesting because I know that, I believe I'm correct on this, that Mack Truck, if you have a Mack truck, they will make the parts for it.
Oh, wow.
That was my understanding from years ago, and I assume that is still the case. But I would think that most truck manufacturers are not doing that.
No, especially on the older models. Mm-hmm. They're focusing on new stuff, mainly.
Well, and conversely, we've talked about the old trucks and why sometimes those are more expensive to repair. But then on the flip side, you've got the newer trucks that do have, I kind of going back to the classic cars comparison, mechanics have an easier time working on, an older motor that doesn't have a computer and that's becoming harder to work on or maintain or repair, and all of that goes into what's paid out in the claim, what they have to consider at the time of a claim, which ultimately goes into insurance rates.
Yep.
We have just a tiny bit of time left here, just a tiny bit over a minute, but there's several topics I wish we could get to. One of them, I'm wondering if you can just give us a little bit of a taste of what this does, and that is the effect of hired drivers. If you're expanding from being a single truck to having multiple, what does that do?
That can definitely cause an increase. A lot of companies steer clear of hired drivers, unless maybe you've been insured with them for several years. They feel that hired drivers can cause higher rates. They don't own the equipment. They don't have as much money invested in as you, the owner, does. So they might not take as good of care of your equipment. So you have a hired driver, has an accident. So they look at that can cause your rates to go higher.
Well, and we've seen the situations where that has happened. There's a hired driver in there. Even if you have just one truck, right. You don't even have to have a second and third. But you have a hired driver in there, they get in an accident. We've literally seen situations where they just walk away because they don't have to do anything regarding that claim. They can just go find a new job. We're not saying all hired drivers do that, but it's a huge percentage of our claims.
Okay. We're out of time, but I want to thank you both very much for all the information.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I've been talking with Trina Skywalker and Lisa Waske of OOIDA's Truck Insurance Department. Landline Now will be back in a moment.